Please welcome Ewa Villages and Historical Society.
We're going to start with Carolyn, Weygan-Hildebrand.
Just aloha kako, that means greetings to all of us. Thank you for spending your afternoon with this session. We are very honored to be part of the talk stories here at the APIAHiP and HIP Forum. And immensely really appreciate the opportunity to bring one case from the middle of the Pacific. And also, please feel free to stand up. We can multitask, right? Listen and stand up if you feel like we can ourselves. Yeah. The second case is entitled Ewa Plantation Revisited, Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. We will tag team in presenting this, and our sharing is outlined really in 4 parts, which you will see later. Now, just to gauge who is here today, how many of you have heard or read about Ewa Plantation? Also, yeah, you've been there. He actually joined the last bomb dance there. And how many of you have actually ties there? Like, you know, ties, like, you know, you have relatives there and all that. Wow, you win a prize. This is the only book about one of the books. Okay, thank you. At least it gives us brings us to the space. The plantation era in Hawaii has long gone, and it has ended a while back, and that includes the Ewa Plantation. So when we say Ewa Villages Historical Society, it really talks about Ewa Villages. It refers to the current historic Ewa Villages, which is really, as you know, it's in the middle of the Pacific there, and Ewa Villages is really in the island of Atoll, and it's really the remnant of the plantation village, of the Ewa Plantation town. That Ewa Plantation town is where the Ewa plantation managers and workers live together and around them. And that's basically how we will outline our presentation today. And we have is saying the long story short, as a matter of introduction, echo mamai, an invitation to the space. I think we're just trying to present 4 things of 5 periods to respect the different, cycles of people that went through Ewa. Pre-1980, before the plantation, when you talk about Ewa, it's really a different place. It's not the sliver spot that you saw earlier. And this is the Hawaiian Moke, it's an Ewa Moke district, consisting of, maybe you've also heard, several ahapua, which are Hawaiian land systems. And then the Great Mahelican, that's the big land distribution. As I said, long story short, we want to talk much about that. Now we have the plantation era. Now the plantation era is not the entire space, it's really just a little bit of that space here. And that's owned by Campbell during the Ewa Plantation Company. That's 1890 to 1960, and then it was turned over to Oahu Sugar Company, 1961 to 1970. Long story short, again, the 2 things that I'd like to point out here is this really, it was considered a model plantation community. It's unlike, I guess, when we talk about plantations, there was really a community, and I would personally point out maybe that it was in rental during George Renton. And then one of the things that I'd like to point out too is that really the Ewa Plantation Company never really recovered back from the World War II. So it's, it's glory days of high production, big time in the industrial era in that era. But this is how the plantation was before. You have the Ewa community and then the sugarcane plantation. One of the periods that I'd like to point out too is 1970, 1995. Plantation was being point down. Ewa Plantation was actually, I would say the plantation was still there, but it was really dying already. So what that meant was that the people were really also left on their own. But 2 things happened there.
You're doing great.
Huh?
You're doing great.
Thank you. The labor union, are you hearing it? Yeah. The labor union, 2 things happened there. Labor union, please keep that in mind, they fought for the rights of the workers. So there were housing, they were able to negotiate housing and all that. The other movement that happened from the community there was the preservation of whatever was remaining of the Ewa plantation community. And I'd like to name a few that were important there. Penny Pagliaro, the Chelsea, the Friends for Ewa, and also the late Professor Keola. Then you shift to, so that was what was happening. 1995, Camp LSA was able to sell the land to the city. So the city bought the land by eminent domain. They planned it to be an affordable housing place. But one thing that I'd like to point out too, that was also the time that they declared the entire Ewa area to be your next growth community to solve all the population housing the housing problems in the community. So, but at the same time, they would also declare that little space as a heritage area. So there's a master plan for that. So at least it's safe. But the Ewa that so when people talk about Ewa, anyway, so that was what happened. But during the transition, there was a lot of fights. That's where a lot of the trust disappeared. Like people did not trust the city was not delivering its promises. On top of that, there was a corruption case. On top of that, we, people from the outside, were grabbing those houses because it was affordable to us. We were paying $1,000 plus in mortgage per month, whereas it really gentrification for the Sakanas and the other workers because they were paying $35 a month. So that was such a great. When I went to that, when you see that, it was really just a great traumatic place at that time. So fast forward now, that is what you have in the community. There's a lot more people coming in. So if in 1910, there were 2,500 people in Ewa Plantation community. Now we have maybe 110,000 people in that area. So you can see really the strange thing that's happening right now in our community. Because of the trust, they really, even if people love the area, you cannot really move forward with historic preservation. But what you have there is really still the remnants of the Ewa Plantation. And what I can pose here, that's whether you know the place or not know the place, there is a sense of place. Before and after, you can see that there are still structures there that will remind you that it's from older times. So that's where we come in terms of what we know. Our assessment right now is there is a multi-ethnic community that came out from the Ewa Plantation town times. But now you have neighborhoods like affordable housing projects, growth projects. We are a neighborhood. People trying to be a community, trying to know each other, and we are at that stage. And that's where Ewa Village's Historical Society is suited.
Yeah. So aloha, I know some of you know, many of you know that word, and aloha, ola actually means breath of life. And so how this Ewa Village's Historical Society came about, because there were many of us who wanted to breathe life into what we've known as Ewa Plantation. And not just the place, but the community itself. And we were talking about during this conference about that. And our President Grace is not able to be here with us today, but we do have a very nice video that she recorded. So I'm going to play that. I found that, this is really a great...
Aloha, I'm Grace Koloma Gagala Schwahart, and I'm currently the Ewa Village's Historical Society President. I have a Master of Science in Nursing. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I'm also a captain in the U.S. Navy Reserve, and I volunteer in Scouts of America and the Civil Air Patrol. And as you notice, I don't have a formal background in history or preservation. My motivation comes from my family. The left side of my slide show cards from the Hawaii Plantation Sugar Association and the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. These records can be viewed on the Brigham Young University's collection website, and they document the labor history of over 100,000 men and women who migrated from the Philippines to work on Hawaii sugar plantations between 1906 and 1949. These contracted workers were called sakadas. I take pride in knowing that my grandfather, father, and uncles from San Nicolas, Ilocos Norte were part of this migration wave to Hawaii. These records are of my grandfather, Teofilo Gagala, and his sons who traveled by ship in different years. My grandfather arrived in Hawaii in 1921, and my father came in 1930. They worked at various sugar plantations, including the Ewa Plantation. Our family initially lived in a plantation house in Waipahu, and in the summer of 1976, we moved to Ewa Plantation. We lived in a simple wooden house in Verona Village, and some of my childhood memories of growing up in Ewa include the neighborhood families gathering to talk stories in our carports, our outdoor lanais, or under mango trees while the kids played outside. I also remember the lively parties and Christmas celebrations at the Verona Clubhouse. This Christmas photo from 1978 shows our family in our Ewa house, which still stands today and is shown in the bottom picture. And I don't have a picture of my dad from his youth, but the black and white headshot of his brother Joaquin, taken in the Philippines, helps me to imagine what my dad might have looked like when he was young. I joined the Ewa Village's Historical Society because of my dad, and to honor the dedication of my parents, who, like yours, worked tirelessly to provide a better life for their families. Their efforts enabled us to go to school and pursue opportunities they could only dream of. At Ewa Village's Historical Society, my mission is to help preserve the stories of those who journeyed to Hawaii from China, Portugal, Japan, the Philippines, Korea, Puerto Rico, and Okinawa, carrying with them their hopes and dreams.
I think Grace pretty much said it all, didn't she?
Yeah.
But along that theme of hopes and dreams, as Hui is putting it up there, she actually was my backdoor neighbor in Verona Village. So you'll find all the connections that we have with each other as we continue to present this. So there's still quite a sense of community in when we were growing up, as well as now that we are part of this organization. And for me, this is my grandparents, grandmothers died within a week, 8 days of each other. And so they are the two on the right side, or I'm gonna go clockwise here. Their names are Apollonia and Celestina, and lived to be 110 and 97 years old. So a very long life. And I credit that to our village, because it really did take a village to check in on them while our parents were working. And so that when they passed, I had the sense of I wanted to honor their legacy, because they always said, we come from a humble farming family in the Philippines. It's like education is the only thing that we can give to you, that we can pass on to you. And so I pursued my PhD, and with in mind too that I have a niece and nephew, and I wanted them to know what Ewa Plantation was like. They wanted to know about their family. So looking at that, I thought about what am I going to study? And my wise PhD professor, my chair, after I said, oh, I might do it in the politics of pageants in the Filipino community. And she said, realistically, do you think you're going to have some informants? But I said, yeah, so I was kind of partly joking. I said, I'm going to finish it in 1 year so I can then go back and help my community. And she said, tell me about that. And she was so wise, and I was telling her about this group of girls that I grew up with who were part of this church youth group. I started to cry, and she just pulled it out of me. And so that's how I ended up interviewing the college graduates of Ewa Plantation Town, their reflections of what it was that inspired them or motivated them and contributed to their being successful in their career. And so I had coffee with my girlfriends, who are now grown women, but really in talking with them, I found a sense of that belonging, that special community that we had. And so that's why I focus on the strength of the community cultural wealth. And there I won't go into each of them. But what that also had done was, that was along the time that the city council, city administration, and the community started to gel, come together for the redevelopment of that one village that we had come to that had not been developed yet as part of this historic district called Verona Village. And so you see down below those black and white or brown and white photos, that's the social club that was so much a fabric of Verona Village. And you didn't need an invitation to go to the party. You just showed up. And that was the hangout. And it's a very humble building. And unfortunately, because there were, we were not around yet, and there were not as many people who had that passion to work on the historic preservation. Many of those clubhouse had actually been raised along with some houses, but they're in the process of rehabilitating the rest of the houses there. And so it took the community, we were talking about, the other speakers, that empowerment, that know that there's still a value, that it matters. And so we started to work together as a group, and we did a cleaning up the village. That was one of the things that we wanted to take back, that because the plantation and the city didn't really do a good job of managing our community, so we ended up doing it ourselves. Coordinating with Hawaiian Airlines Pilot Division, the Hawaiian Railway Society. So in the picture to the right, that would be at 9 o'clock, you will see the community. It says Malama Verona, taking care of Verona. And that's where we would come together and meet. And then in 2016, we had about 40 plus community members from Verona, went to the city council, and that started the process for rehabilitation of the village. So we're going to go on to our other member. Let's see here. Emmy, passing it on to you.
Agnes talked about the Sonality girls, and that's how I knew Agnes. Yeah, we're childhood friends, and she brought me along to be a part of the villages. Yeah, I wanted to play something. Since that first day they talked about feeling a place, I wanted to briefly play a song that was written by an old Ewa resident, and it's called Life of Ewa. And I'm hoping some of the lyrics on here can help give you a sense of place. Can you folks hear? I'll just play a clip of it. It's on YouTube. It's called Life of Ewa. And you can kind of put
You can sing it kind of.
right there. But I wanted to have you hear the lyrics because that's the community that we grew up in and we want to preserve it. Yeah, so if you look, I don't know if you heard the lyrics of passing the Lincoln statue. Yeah, so Ewa School was established, was built in 1920. The statue was dedicated in the early 40s. And everybody who grew up in Ewa and went to Ewa School, that's one tradition that just sticks with us, the Ewa Lincoln Day program. And to this day, they still have it. And I went to the 80th celebration this year? And the kids sing the song that I just played. And I just love the continuity. So if you see that top right picture, that's an old picture of Ewa School. That building in the back, the old auditorium is now down. And then that's the Lincoln statue. So every Lincoln Day, the students drape the statue with lace and Yeah, so I just wanted to point that out. But real quickly, what my ties are with the plantation, just like Grace, my father, pictured here, yeah, with me and my older sister. And so that's my dad on the left, and on the right is his uncle. And that's the plantation house that I grew up in, Fernandez Village. I don't know if you heard that in the song. So my dad came after the big strike of 1946. He came after 1946, worked at Ewa Plantation, and he came as a bachelor. His intent was to send money back home, send his 3 younger sisters, my aunts, to college. And in the meantime, one of his friends in Ewa said, "You gotta go back home and get married." So he went back to the Philippines, got married. My mom came years later, and so my siblings and I were all born in Ewa. So there were 4 of us, and so that's my mom. Came without her parents. As a parent now, I just appreciate so much. She befriended our neighbors. They became our godparents, and that was like her support group. But my older sister and I were born at the Ewa Plantation Hospital, and then my 2 younger siblings were born at Kaiser Hospital. So that's my ties with Ewa. And my passion, just like Grace, is to preserve the stories of Ewa, because it honors my parents and all those that brought people to Hawaii. So when we talk about Asian diaspora, a lot of them were Asian and Pacific Islanders. So a lot of people, when we go to Hawaii, they're like, so much Asians here. Well, that's the history of the local culture of Hawaii. Yeah, and then another part is where I live in Ewa Beach. There has been so much change in the last 40 years. When I was growing up, even in high school, the main street in Ewa, going to Ewa Beach, was only 2 lanes. 1 lane in, 1 lane out. And everything was sugar cane. So if you ever go to Hawaii, you need to go visit Ewa, because Ewa Plantation is still a plantation town, intact, pretty much, with old original buildings. But the 2 streets is now 6 lanes, and that's in the last 40 years. It's now 6 lanes, and gone are the sugar canes. It's all homes and malls and stores. And so my passion is to preserve the history. Yeah, not just because there was a plantation, but that's a big part of understanding local culture. Yeah, the migrants that shape local culture. Okay, and I do volunteer also at the Hawaii Plantation Village. I know where Gail spoke at, but just to also teach visitors and students, the history of our plantation, and the influence it still has today.
Yeah, we go.
Okay.
How much time do we have?
How are we with time?
I know.
I can talk forever, so.
I think we're spending a lot on our personal stories, which I think you're also finding out about, Ewa in that way.
Actually, the reason why we're introducing ourselves that way. The reason why we're introducing ourselves that way is actually preservation has to be within the heart. And I'm Carolyn Weygan-Hildebrand. As I said, I did come from the plantation community. I went there during the City Affordable Project time, so I bought house there. I was so shocked with honestly, the tension, the conflict, the corruption that happened there. But one thing that I will just share with you is that when we co-found, the thing that I can share is that what I bring to the table, it's not the stories. What I bring to the table maybe is that I was raised in Baguio City, which is a very cosmopolitan time. We learn how to get along. And I also am an Igorot, which is an indigenous people of the Cordillera, which means that I totally respect the layer beneath the Ewa Plantation village. And I'm forever sensitive to the Hawaiian layer. Also, I speak Ilocano and Filipino in its next, so I kind of like, if we have oral history, I volunteer, say I can do that interviews. But 2 things I'd like to emphasize here: multidisciplinary, that's what I bring to the table. But a little bit fault of that, I tend to overanalyze things. That's balanced by my being an edible gardener. In edible gardening, if you don't plant, you don't eat. So forget the overanalysis, just do. So that's where my balancing game is. In Ewa, there's the malunggay tree. If you ever know the story of Hawaii, when you see a malunggay tree or moringa tree in a backyard, that's the Filipino flag. And then just my neighborhood there, you can see chicken and other plants. And that's our house. The other picture there was that really just I continue to learn the lessons of indigenous ways, which is to always think 7 generations ahead. So it's a sustainability thing. So every decision that I make, even in Ewa Village's historical society, is bounded by the 7 generation thinking. Okay, I'm Pop. Okay, so we got together. I mean, after all the turmoil, it was really hard to get together. But one time we said, okay, let me set up a meeting. I had a little bit free time. I was not so busy with work. So I said, okay, let's meet. Invited so many people. Then there were 3 people who appeared. So Ewa Village's Historical Society was founded in 2016. And then I just like to read the Wahipana. Can you go back with that? Because there's so many things you can do in a historical place like that. But I think when we talked about it, I have to read that. When we have to read that, we borrow from the Hawaiian perspective of Wahipana. That many cultures have places that they hold special above others. Places much more than a geographical location. It provides them with their history, a sense of belonging, and a feeling of stability. And Wahipana is sacred to those who deem it as such. We allow people to revere and I can't even pronounce it, and remember the past. Wahipana would not exist. That will explain to you why it was very, very important to the survival of a historical society to have the Agneses of the world, Emmy and Grace. I don't think even with my, my theoretical knowledge about historical societies, we will have an Ewa Village's historical society.
I think it takes all of us.
Yeah, that's what I bring to the table. I overthink and then I do. But I really don't have that, the inner knowledge experience. What I have is Baguio, yeah. So fast forward, we were so busy with work, but keep on talking back and forth. Before that, there was an Ewa Historical Society that failed, so we were trying to think we will write with that one, but everybody in the community said that has too much baggage. Come up with your own 501c3. So with the help of Congressman Case, we were able to fast forward 2021. Eventually now, this is our composition. We are happy that we have board members. A lot of them are from the community. We also have a very strong group of advisors. For some reason, Emmy was even able to get the former First Lady of Hawaii, who used to live in Dawn Amana. So we are setting up for the future with this set of advisors, but in terms of strategic priorities, there's so many things to do, so we just said, okay, we'll focus on doc stories, interpretive signage of Renton Road and former plantation manager's house, and that is where the most difficult thing Agnes will talk about. Oh no, Emmy, talk stories.
Yeah. I know we're running out of time. It's now 1:50, so we'll quickly go through these, and then we have a video to share. So do we have about 5 minutes? Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things we want to do is preserve the history of Ewa. So 2 things that we've been kind of trying to do is document oral histories. And the other one is talk stories. So we partnered with the neighborhood public library, a couple of public library, and we've had 3 sessions so far of talk stories. And so the first one we had was someone who grew up in Ewa. Yeah, his name is Dennis Arie. Yeah, and so you folks can pass this around, but he worked years just collecting oral histories with friends he grew up with. But I have to share that story because I grew up in Ewa, was born in Ewa, and I never knew this story until I met Dennis. And I always love to share it because it's such a full circle moment. But Mr. Aire grew up in Ewa. He was 3rd generation, yeah, Japanese. He grew up in Ewa Plantation. He's now a retired architect, yeah. So all of us who grew up in Ewa, there was this old bowling alley, and I used to go there for summer fun, yeah? Later on was just a big hall, and right on the outside of it, there was a plaque, and I never noticed the plaque, because when you're in elementary, it's not like you're gonna read all this history stuff, right? And so it was the names, the hall was built with donations from the Ewa community, and it honored the 10 veterans who grew up in Ewa and died during World War II. And I never knew that one of those names was his late father. He was just a baby, I think, when he passed. And then fast forward from his book and from our talk story, I learned that he designed the new office building at Ewa Elementary, his alma mater. And I thought that was so cool. And the way it's built, it's like the office and the library. In the middle, there's a courtyard. And he got that plaque removed with his father's name on it. Yeah, and it's on a stone right in the courtyard. And I said, wow, this is such a chicken skin moment. And I think people need to know the history of Ewa with all the changes, all the new communities around, because not only does it give a sense of place, but then all the newcomers realize how special it is, yeah? So no history, no self. You know history, you know self. Okay? Okay, I hope I'm moving fast enough.
I think, yeah, we have to scroll.
That's another interesting story.
You want me to summarize it?
Yeah.
Without tape?
We'll do the video.
Oh, you could just go ahead.
Can we do the video?
Okay, yeah, so while he's doing that, basically the next part, honestly, our approach was we didn't have a lot of money, so we kind of just do the easy things, right? But one of the things is we did a walkthrough, and then eventually we had the nerve to really invite the community to also tell their story through an first ever community day.
That was planned in 3 months, I did that.
Our president was so gung-ho, she planned it in 3 months. And here's the
in terms of really it being a community and being right with each other with all these different communities coming together. It's just been so rewarding.
Yes, and the thing is we started planning this event only 9 weeks ago, and it's just amazing how many people from the community, how many organizations have come out to help, to do the painting and the prepping and the planting and just coming out here to do the exhibits. Like people are just so excited about, enjoying Ewa and sharing the stories of Ewa. So I'm just so motivated to do more work, to organize more intergenerational activities of learning and sharing with the community.
In terms of community, this island, it's kind of a small community, but what we want to carry on is the beauty and diversity of our community and how we all came together and, we are appreciating the aloha.
Yes.
It's been, that's been embraced by, our host culture. And I hope that, this continues to promote as a community.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much to the Performance Arts Center of Kapolei and Moments Unforgettable for bringing their kids out to perform for us today because they were just amazing. So, I'm just going to put in a plug for them that if anyone or, not if you're interested, you should be interested in performing arts. So please come out to Kapolei, check out their website for tickets to their fall production.
Yep, there are so many people we want to thank.
Yeah.
So please, if we didn't single you out, know that we really appreciate everything that you do and just contributing to make this a really community event.
You want me to wrap up? So I think what happened so that was our first part. As I said, there was a lot of distrust. So there's a lot of things that you think about in going out to the community. But here, as a heritage, you see, and after that, what is out there left for us? Really, the biggest challenge is still the Ewa Plantation manager's house. It's such a rundown property. The city neglected it. They don't have any interest in it. But that Ewa Plantation, they brought some of the politicians, their managing directors there, and I think that there's a little bit of movement. So what is next step for us? We're going to the newly organized Historic Preservation Commission. That was the recommendation that we present. Basically, what we are going to present, how we are presenting here today. We will continue with the top story because that's the freest thing that we can avail of. And we have to finish really some of the grants, what I call the honeymoon grants. When when you're a new nonprofit organization, you approach people and they give you the opportunity to test things out with small grants like top story, oral history, and all that. The biggest thing that also happened is that we have a board member who's connected with the library of the University of Hawaii West Oahu, which is very new. That was the intellectual capital that was missing at that time. So, okay, time is up, she says. Thank you very much. And right here to
Yeah, so we heard from two very diverging case studies that are connected by the Pacific, and so thank you to our panelists again. We do have a few minutes to really dig into these questions. I'll be selfish and take the first one just to get you guys warmed up, but Desun, as you saw, you presented first from a very research perspective, right, and then followed by a very community and grassroots approach. Where do you see your research being applied to a means to an end of what you might see with your counterparts at the Historical Society?
Yeah. So, hopefully, I think towards the end of my presentation, I called on structural changes to historic preservation laws. And I think these changes and implementation of policy that the United States should take seriously under COFA, we should empower the communities to litigate violence that was done to them, or ask for redress or reparations, or institute some sort of truth and reconciliation commission. So hopefully, I think I want to use this research as a way for, of course, calling on the broader historian community to start paying attention to this. This is one of the cruxes of the Pacific and Cold War, politics and history. But of course, this is a community that has been inflicted extreme violence and harm, and the United States continues to downplay. The United States and Japan continues to downplay this by taking advantage of this semi-sovereign kind of political status of Micronesia and the COFA territories. So, that said, the bigger question is how can we use this history, historic preservation, link it to policy, and then get changes done in the international arena? That's the steps that I'm hoping that each of us can really participate in. There's this really interesting, I met the grandson of one of the survivors here in this history, and he said that the same number of people were displaced in this Uprising and Massacre as they were with the Bikini Atoll bombings. And so what's interesting is he says the United States is willing to accept, I think the United States is willing to quote unquote accept what happened to Bikini Atoll insofar that they're able to frame it in terms of financial obligations. We are going to solve this issue by establishing a trust fund or giving money to victim families without providing any sort of redress and reparation. So that's upheld as the crux of U.S. RMI politics. But then there's so many other atrocities that happen as well that inflicted an equal number of people. So Mili Atoll, for example. And I think if the United States and COFA can contain it within the local level without percolating to the national international level, I think that's how they placate and manage history. And I think we really need to change that.
And just as a response of a village, do you guys feel like you're at the receiving end of those political implications, or are you focusing more on the community and the grassroots efforts that we saw with your personal connection?
I think both, because one village, the one that I'm helping with, that I grew up in, is still in the process of being redeveloped, and so there's still a lot of political, things that we have to navigate. And then for the other villages, but I also wanted to add that on the flip side, we could use more, research, and we have that interest in doing that too, as educators, so to benefit the grassroots.
Exactly. We're talking about so many groups of people and then individual stories. We do need the strong research. Talking about, yes, we need policy. In fact, the reason why we cannot access the mansion right now is because of a new rule that was created apparently in 2021. So I was not aware of that they changed the rule that now we cannot a nonprofit cannot actually have this open partnership with the city. Now we have to compete for it. So what does that mean? I'm trying to be aware of all the developers who are trying to try to get into that. But my response also to the Marshall Islands is, do take the presence of so many COFA population in Hawaii to also be your energy in terms of creating the change. That's your grassroots movements that you have in diaspora. That's all I can comment.
Thank you. Questions from the audience?
Thanks so much for sharing. Really appreciate all of your perspectives.
You just gotta hold it close.
Thanks so much for sharing. I'm wondering, how does cultural and historic preservation play a role? Yes, or like whether or not does play a role in some of these movements for sovereignty, whether in the Marshall Islands or in Hawaii.
It makes it very complex.
Yeah.
And it makes you really think about your values hard. To say the respect. You have to define that really. And in a sense, in our community right now, we're just in the story building phase. I mean, we're just empowering the communities too. But really, at the academic level, you have to also be ready to prepare your communities to face the hard questions. For example, February 2023, I think, there was a protest against the Lincoln celebration statue. Why? Because of the indigenous connection, right? So that's the first time it became a very difficult question. But we have to continue talking, and that's why we have to keep it centering. And to your point, it's really consulting with the community, always educating ourselves with what's going on, and then let's see what happens. I don't have the answer, but it's a very complex one.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think every sovereignty and independence movement has like sacred sites, buildings, and battlefields that were like the turning points of like their movement. And in order, if you want to placate or destroy a movement or a community, you destroy their sacred sites and you destroy historic sites that build a movement. So I think that's where like, historic preservation can play a role in sovereignty and preserving these sites. So specifically in the Marshall Islands, we have a situation where the U.S. federal government under COFA can go into the waters and land of Micronesia and do whatever it wants, but it doesn't have to consult with the local community, the local historic preservation office like it does. So, you know, maybe we can envision some sort of policy change where NHPA, the National Historic Preservation Act, is taken seriously, and the U.S. is required by law to consult with Micronesian and Marshallese experts, historians, and archaeologists in the HPO, and then their considerations can be taken into account in all federal undertakings. So I think that's maybe like step one in what people can really do to kind of link preservation with sovereignty.
We're here to mention. We take any advice.
So I would like to propose to you three ladies specifically, don't wait for the city council to partner with you, run for city council, all three of you. I'm serious, I'm not kidding, I'm serious. Women of color, especially women of color, especially immigrants, we have to be asked 11 times before people run for any kind of office. Consider this my 11th time asking you. Run for office, get on the city council, do what needs to be done, do it yourselves, because no one else is going to come do it for you. And then I have a question. You're talking about changing policy, right? So is COFA still considered where COFA citizens here in the United States, I guess everywhere in the United States, if you have COFA status, you still cannot vote?
Only citizens can vote. So if they're born here, they can vote. If they become a naturalized citizen, they can vote. So they're considered migrants. So just like what you would call a permanent resident. So
we need to change that. We need to change that. How are we going to do it? That's how policy is going to change. Seriously, I'm not kidding you. Start doing work on that because you pay taxes, right? People under COFA pay taxes.
I think, go ahead. Oh, I gotta get in there.
Go ahead.
People under COFA pay taxes, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can travel with documentation. It's not the people who were in the atolls, their fault that the United States bombed that place, and then everybody had to leave because it was no longer inhabitable. So you're not just migrants. So there is this movement already, I know, that is gearing up to show that you have representation so that you can become U.S. citizens or be declared U.S. citizens. So continue working on that. That's where you're going to change the policy, or how you're going to change the policy.
Yeah, there's definitely a power in becoming a political constituency, right? Like politics, political institutions take you seriously. And also, this connects back to the 1994 Honolulu Star Sentinel article in which Senator Mili Atoll said, why did the United States and Japan sign a treaty about us but without consulting us? Aren't we constituents? And does that mean we're Americans? Like, are we under the jurisdiction of the United States, and therefore can't we have any political vote or voice? So yeah, it's like, again, it's denied sovereignty, but also like denied jurisdiction, denied sovereignty, denied representation, but dominance and rule over people.
Being in solidarity with the Pacific Islanders, actually Hawaii has, I guess, taken the brunt in many ways of taking care of or assisting the Kofa community, because only recently they gained insurance again, or insurance benefits. So it's been very difficult. And I think for the Kofa community, Desun, explained that very well. But in terms of, they are a small group during the pandemic. They were disproportionately affected a lot, as well as other Pacific Islanders, Filipinos, Native Hawaiians. So it's this disenfranchised group. But it's really complicated because actually in the World Court, Hawaii is still a kingdom. And the United States government has acknowledged that the Hawaiian Kingdom were illegally taken by it. But that's I hesitate to go into it because it's really complex. So in terms of cultural, the policies, how do we navigate that? Going back to your question, it's very complex because many of the cultures, ethnicities were mixed. And so we're trying to navigate that. The conversation, I think, is just it's starting for us to have those very hard conversations, especially, what's going on in the world. And so we are mindful of our host culture, and not everyone may know that. So that's why Ewa Villages Historical Society is giving us space for everyone to share those stories so we can learn about each other and our history.
A very practical thing, honestly, was I thought from culturally appropriate behavior. Your soft voices will go a long, long way in trying to talk to each other, so that when it comes time to this very difficult question like overthrow, then we can listen to each other. So it's very difficult as an immigrant, for example, to talk about that. The same thing. Yeah. So I think the solidarity can be built that way. I always say have it with aloha, discuss with aloha, and it's a real thing. You have to practice it. It's not automatic, especially if you come from a community that you argue a lot, or you're right.
So I think it's where Ewa community, Plantation Town, was unique, in the sense that it was a model community. It was insulated community. We had our own gym. The people used to come from all different parts of the island for the summer carnival. We had a clinic. Early education, healthcare was really something that the management paid attention to take care of their employees. Not to say that the conditions were the most ideal. Over time it's evolved, as if you know about the plantation history. But I think there was an effort being, even in the 80s when we were growing up, we still, they and some of our other friends would be at the Ewa store, as we call it. It had like dry goods, it still had like butcher shop in some ways, and then, grocery store. So that used to be hangout across the street is the credit union and the post office. So we had everything really we needed. So it wasn't until probably Ewa Plantation Town merged with Oahu Sugar Company that we have more of outside influence. And me coming from Waipahu, where there was already already other jobs that the community were employed in, and going into Ewa Plantation Town, I could feel the difference, that this was a community that really knew each other, came together when at many of these events. Like I said earlier, you didn't necessarily need an invitation to come to some of these functions, but you really had a sense of and a strong identity, a strong sense of belonging. By that time in the 80s, there's mostly Filipinos and Japanese. But there's still, a pride in being part of Ewa. Interestingly, when I asked those that interviewed for my research, I said, how do you identify Filipinx, Filipina, Filipino? And they said, somebody said, I'm a girl, So I said, okay, I get it. So there's this very strong sense of community. And when we went to a funeral recently, it really could feel everyone that we knew growing up, and even now, I was actually kind of surprised. I mean, the people wanting to share the condolences or comfort the family. It extended, if you're familiar with the Mili, and it's time's up. Time's up for the person, but the legacy of that person who passed lived on in the community as we saw it. Thank you.
All right, let's give a round of applause to Desun.